All right, welcome back to another episode of EventHubs Talking Block. I am John Catalyst Gray, and with me as always is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
Hey, what's going on, Internet? Thank you for jumping back into another one of these Talking Block videos with us. We've got some new stuff to talk about. There is new Street Fighter 6 footage, now only a little bit, guys, because the rest of it is unofficial and nobody saw it, and definitely nobody posted it on YouTube and got copyright strikes. But yes, Capcom has released a bunch of footage for Street Fighter 6. We're seeing a bunch of the new characters, but thus far has only officially released some footage of Manon and Marisa, and even that in and of itself has been really exciting. I think there's a lot of stuff to get to here, and I think the first thing we want to do is just kind of have a hot take grade for what we feel like these characters are looking like thus far in this one match that we've seen them play.
Yeah, and some of the footage from the trailers as well, but I want to explain our grading system. It should be very familiar for people, but we've got the S tier, which is like the 99, 100 percentile. Very hard to get an S grade. It's basically you've got to perfect the character. A, B, C, all that. C is the last passing grade. That's basically, 60% or above. D is 50% or below. Then there's F, and then there's incomplete, as you mentioned. Incomplete is the one you do not want to get from us. That means you really botched it. You don't want the F grade either, but the incomplete grade is the worst of the worst. That is a complete and total abysmal failure.
Yeah.
So, all right, John. I'll start with you actually, since I explained the grading. What do you think of either of the characters? Where do you want to start?
Manon I guess we can go in alphabetical order here and go with Manon first. She is a judo/ballet fighter. She black Swansia. One of the most graceful characters I think I've seen. A terrifying sweep. Oh my gosh. And this comes from a Goken player who had a -2 sweep back in the day. She looks pretty good. She's our first full-on grappler character. And that's something that people have really been wondering about. How are grapplers going to operate in the Street Fighter 6 meta? Are they going to be ridiculously oppressive with, the ability to pounce and move forward? We're not seeing a ton of that with her. I really like her visuals thus far. I do like seeing how she plays out all of these moves that, like I said, ton of grace, a lot of flow. I would give her, and I don't want to be just super open and cavalier with my good grades. I'm going to give Manon a B at this stage, although that could change in the future the more we see from her. But right now, she's a solid B.
Okay. Yeah, I've actually got Manon as an A, and the big reason why is I love how fluid her animations are. I love how beautiful the character is. Capturing a character and making them have personality in their moves and style is really hard to do. And Manon has come through and actually been a bit of a bang for the community in terms of a lot of people are saying, hey, I want to main this character. She looks very interesting. She's got a lot of style to her. I've been extremely happy with this character.
But haven't you also been saying that she might be the character that everyone gets super pissed off about fighting because she's going to be so frustrating?
Yeah. So let's get right into that. So we both got our pretty decent scores here. We like the character overall. Manon has an overdrive, or we're going to use EX a lot in terms of that. But command grab that has strike invincibility on it, as she goes right through one of Marisa's attacks and grabs her. And then every time Manon does a command grab, her counter goes higher. That she has a little counter of their install, whatever you want to term that as. And it shows. So she starts at 1 and goes to 5. And it seems to change the properties and damage every single time she does a successful command grab. In both of Manon's command grabs, both normal and EX, they increase her counter when they connect. So it's not like she's, it's got one way to do it. She's got multiple ways to pull it off. And then the command grab counter, it carries over between rounds as well. So if Manon, you have got her all the way back in the corner, she's got no health left, you've got almost full health, you're probably going to see that Manon player start going in for command grabs at that last bit, because it's well, you know what? I'm no longer playing for this round. I'm playing for the second round. John, how does that make you feel?
It's interesting, especially as a Jamie player who has a similar level up system, right? That is from round to round. When you get 4 drinks in one round, you go to the next one, you're back at 1, and it starts all over. This is you're kind of getting at game long as opposed to round long strategy. And we've seen that before with meter management, right? Like in Street Fighter 5, you didn't want to use all of your meter unless it was going to kill, for a critical art in most situations, unless of course you could follow up afterwards, like another character we're going to talk about in a second. But this is her with command grabs, one of the most basic fundamental parts of her toolkit as a grappler. And in a a simplified way of saying it is Manon is stronger in round 3, generally speaking, because she's going to have already begun to stack however much she's stacked. And so this is a character that wants to see things go the distance as far as there's more opportunity for her to level up. It doesn't mean she's going to, you might go all the way through 3 rounds and never land a command grab, but this is a different kind of approach to things than most of the rest of the cast is going to be considering when they're playing. And that to me is interesting. I also get kind of nervous anytime someone sticks out really far away from the group because it's just very hard to balance them with the rest of everybody. Yeah. I'm not saying this is going to break stuff, but I'm a little wary.
Yeah, I call her Manon for reasons where I don't think she's going to have much of the way of hurt boxes. The way this character moves and the way she flows throughout the match, if you hit the button at the wrong time, she's just going to go right through it. Speaking of going right through it, she can actually combo with her normal command grab on top of having strike at invincibility with the EX1. So, and I believe that starts at level 2. That means that her command grab is really good because not only do the properties start improving, the damage starts improving. Mm-hmm. And it's just, this character is starting to give me flashbacks of like Abel and Laura. I don't think that's
what she's supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't think she plays exactly like those characters at all because, Laura's a fairly decent fireball character for a grappler. And this is the Street Fighter 6 version of Grapplers, which is quite interesting here because I don't know exactly in the meta how these characters are working out, but like to give people an example, like Zangief in Street Fighter 5 was almost just this completely dominant Okazemi character. If he could get in that one time, he could basically, just make correct reads and kill you. It does not look like that's going to be a really good option here in this game, where consistent Okazemi pressure is, the dominating factor. It's definitely good, but I don't think it's going to be on the level of what Street Fighter 5 is, and it looks like the developers are basically counterbalancing that by giving people strike invincible command grabs, which just, it's like, oh my gosh, like you're blowing through Marisa, one of the big attack from her, blowing right through it and just grabbing her, and it's like, wow. And then on top of that, Manon has a low spinning attack that seems to connect from about half screen or further. And Marisa looks to be blocking high and it still connects.
That looks like a sweep, right? Is that what you're talking about? Where she spins on the ground?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a sweep, or it looked like a special to me, but I'm not sure.
Such a good sweep that it looks like a special.
Yeah. It looks really good. So those are the type of tools I'm expecting command grab characters to have in this game, where it's you can keep them at base somewhat. Zoning is definitely going to be better in this. We're seeing all the fireballs have much faster startup. We'll talk about Dalsum here in the future, but his Yoga Flame starts up really quickly, and his walk speed is much faster than Dalsum is used to. DJ throws 5,000 projectiles on screen. Like, zoning is quite different in this, so the grapplers have to have a really good tool set to get around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday when we were just basically discussing the Street Fighter 6 meta sort of behind the scenes. And where I'm at right now, I have some leads, but I do not know for sure, well, of course not for sure, what to focus in on, what to hone in on as like what's going to be the emerging best strategy, what kind of traits are going to rise above the others, because it seems like there are so many ways to play this game, whether you're going to be sitting back and like relying on chucking plasma and manipulating through that, whether it's going to be through heavy offense, whether it's going to be through counter defense, and we'll get into that because that's sort of where I'm at right now. But as now we're introducing these grappling, brawling type characters, and they have these other maneuvers that you have to both consider in the way that they get through existing defenses and strategies, and how they are going to maybe be throwing their own weight around and molding the meta as people try to deal with their abilities. Like Manon can now, like, she not only has these command grabs and these ways of moving forward to get to you really quickly, but also she can pull you in. She has like the vacuum like target combo that acts a lot like Seth's tandem engine in Street Fighter 4, where it looks like even when she lands it, you're at a disadvantage, but she can't keep comboing is what it looks like. But you're right up in her face and you're at disadvantage, and not a great place to be. Especially against a grappler. So it's like, man, there's so many different ways of going about the meta and trying to navigate this and trying to set up strategies. Which one's going to emerge as the dominant one or the dominant handful at the top? I don't know. But it's very interesting, and it has me wondering, which I think is a good thing, especially at this stage in the game.
Yeah. Manon has probably the fastest and longest range grappler I've ever seen in a Street Fighter title. It's the way she moves, her range, all the stuff she offers for a grappler. It looks very bonkers to me, and it's not too big of a shock because sometimes it's you take a character like Laura and you try to shoehorn them into Street Fighter 6, and that could be a big problem because they have an existing moveset with existing expectations, and that can be really hard to basically put in a game that you don't know exactly how you're fearing, John, right now, how the meta is going to evolve. Even the developers don't know for sure. They have a pretty good idea. They know what's strong. We're seeing what they're doing. I personally think Drive Rush is going to be huge in this game, but we don't know if it's going to be a bunch of things. And then of course whiff punishing, we talked about before, punish counters, absolutely gigantic in this game. But beyond that, grapplers tend to have their own meta, and they tend to have their own stuff they're really good at, in addition to the other things.
Well, I kind of wanted to move on to Marisa a little bit here.
Yeah, let's get into her.
Well, what did you give for your grade for Marisa?
So Marisa, she reminds me a decent bit of Abigail. I really do like her style. She's definitely a Game of Thrones type of character, Brienne of Tarth, modeled after this really super strong woman. And I do overall like her stuff. But I'm not as over the moon with her as I am with Manon. So I give Marisa a B. I'm very happy with the character. I think she's going to be pretty darn good, but not one of my favorites yet.
Same kind of general thing from me as from what I said about Manon. A lot of good thus far. Nothing that makes me get up out of my chair, and we still have a ways to go before we see everything that these characters can do. But I also gave her a B. Just it's better than average. It's going really well right now. Let's see some more, but I am enticed. There's a handful of things. Some of her moves hit so hard, and not only when you see the life bar melt, that might be a problem, that might get changed, but just the animations that you see, they're very satisfying. They, like you were saying, the grace and the flow of Manon, the same can be said about the power and the authority behind the attacks of Marisa. And they're really cool. You feel these hits when they land, and it means something, and that kind of is enticing. So I really like what they've done in both those fronts. It shows a lot of versatility by the developers to be able to capture both of those very different things in an endearing way in both cases.
Yeah, Marisa definitely has an armored attack with her stance move, and it can go to different attacks, I believe. As Manon, when she goes into her stance, basically Manon hits a jab, and a bit of gray health pops up there while she's in her armored state. So it's interesting that Marisa is definitely based around armor. There's a certain amount of that, and that starts to give me Abigail vibes, I should say. And then one of her things in there goes into a counter, and then some of her stuff. The biggest thing I noticed about Marisa is she hits like a dang truck. She is very powerful. One of the things that she does there, looks like it drains about 35% of Manon's life to KO her, and that's a big thing, assuming that damage scaling still kicks in very heavily as your life starts to deplete.
Are you talking about where she basically executes her with puts her head on the ground and does her, which might just be her forward throw? I'm not sure, but is that what you're talking about? Where she puts her down?
I think it's a throw from the stance. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's one I think that has partial armor and stuff on it. But 35% of the character's life when they are at the end of their life bar is a big deal in past Street Fighter games. And Marisa may be the most damaging character that we know of in the game. Now, we don't know what Zangief is going to look like right now, but Marisa is super powerful. She has that jump up and then pound down EX.
Hey, that skips your entire critical art. You know how level 3 turns into critical art when it's the last 25% of your health? If she can kill you from before that, it skips all of that with one attack.
Yeah, so it does look like her moves are very heavily telegraphed, though. A lot of startup on them.
Slow.
Yeah, a lot of so very methodical how she has to approach stuff, which is that's basically what you want. But she really looks dynamic and fun. Probably not going to enjoy playing against her too much, but I know a lot of people who are going to like that style of play.
I think Marisa is the closest thing to Street Fighter V play that we've seen thus far in Street Fighter 6. By that, if she's relatively slower on her feet and slower with her moves, but they have the benefit of absorbing. I'm not exactly sure how this will play out. My inclination is to say that that's a disadvantage, that you need to be faster, that walk speed will actually be a benefit here. But as I consider the power of armor, it may be that if you are a Marisa player, you're playing more along the lines of predicting what your opponents are going to do and inputting the counter a little bit beforehand, in that I'm going to be in this situation, they're going to push a button, and I'm going to absorb this attack and then hit them with this advantage that I have over others. It's basically like a faster version of a drive impact, right? Because she's going to absorb with one hit, but it's not going to take 25 frames to do. I think that that's going to be more her play, and that she doesn't have to do it as often, even though that's a harder thing to, I think, make land than just being like really quick on your feet and coming up and landing a hit. She's not going to have to do as many hits because she doles out tons of damage, and we'll see how that plays out in the end. The other big thing about her is if she lands her level 3, at least in her non-critical art version, I think that's what we saw, it immediately corners you. That might change with her critical art because we've seen some pretty drastic changes with things like that in critical arts, but the corner in this game is huge because you have throw loops first and foremost, plus the advantage of drive impact. So I can see some very big advantages from Marisa just designed into her gameplay, but I do wonder if she is more due for less reaction and more of like a predictive kind of character, and it's just that she doles out so much damage that she can do that. And that's kind of the grappler. I don't even know if she's really a grappler so much. I see her more as a brawler. But that's sort of more the grappler mentality, is like, I'm going to spend life trying to get those hits, but once I get them, you're maybe cornered, maybe shot across the screen, and I get to close in on you, and I'm taking off a ton of damage, so I don't have to hit you as many times as you have to hit me. So that's what I'm seeing from Marisa thus far.
Yeah, and what will be very compelling in this game is to see how stuff like parry impacts grapplers, and because typically you're wanting to zone out any kind of grappler or brawler character, keep them at bay, and you're giving them ready access to stuff like a perfect parry, and then something like a drive impact, which is a huge forward moving thing with armor on it, and how is that going to play out with these grappler characters? So it's quite interesting. I don't know if the level of zoning we've seen against grappler characters is going to be as applicable in this game, just because of the multitude of options. But we do have Third Strike as a good example of that, where characters like Hugo were not that strong. Alex was also not that strong. Yep. So it's not like that ends up being a dominant style of play. And grapplers, as we've talked about before, generally speaking, when they are top tier, they are some of the most oppressive and worst characters to have as top tier, because they basically just turn the game into a one-player game, which, as we learned with Street Fighter V, that's not a good thing. That's not Street Fighter when it's a one-player game. That's Mario, kind of thing. It's, that's kind of what we expect. So I do think the grapplers, and again, it doesn't take a top-tier grappler to be a tournament-winning character. We have seen that numerous times where mid-tier or low-tier grapplers have won tournaments before, and multitudes of them. And when they are top tier,
it needs to be because the player is especially good at reading the other person. That's the best case scenario for a grappler, because they have the ability, Snake Eyes with Zangief and Street Fighter 4, they have the ability to seemingly take on anyone, but it's not because the character is doing them as many benefits as their ability to get through the character's obvious weaknesses and then apply the strengths. That's okay. But the strength for a grappler should not have training wheels, because that's just too much. And like you say, would just dominate the game and turn it into a very, very singular kind of thing.
Yeah, and last note here for me is I'm really curious what this all means for Zangief, because we've seen nothing about him yet.
I forget he's in the game.
And yeah, it's Zangief is one of the most polarizing characters in the history of Street Fighter, because of just his playstyle and how he works. And it's like, well, what did they do with him? Like, he's he's all about the command grab, right? He's all about the SPT. So what did Capcom do to make him balanced in this game? And I think that's going to answer a lot of questions.
Has that ever been something that they've worried about Zangief, is balance him? And it's like, no, just get him in the game and have him be bad. Yeah.
But shockingly enough, actually, Super Turbo Zangief is infamous for because Ryu is like basically the 5th best character in that game. He's right outside of the top tier. Won a ton of tournaments. Zangief's match against Ryu is really, really, really good. It's like 5-5. It's like perfect. But Zangief is generally he's generally low tier in that game. He's like, garbage tier. But they balanced him really well against Ryu, and then just said like all the other cast members, who cares?
So they
have balanced him. Yeah, they have balanced him in the past. But he's just so polarizing, because again, even in Street Fighter V, like everyone calls him like the worst character in the game right now in that version. But you go in there and look at the stats, and he's like in the top 6 or something like that for most played characters. People love Zangief in Street Fighter V. They love playing him. And even despite him being lower tier. But his win ratio is not bad either. It's quite interesting. So I do think it's a little bit of Zangief players kind of saying, "Hey, cry me a river." This guy can't play him, can't do all this other kind of stuff. Meanwhile, they're racking up a good amount of wins with the character. I'm not saying he's a great character by any means, but he's probably far more viable than most people let on. Unlike someone like Gil.
Poor Gil. Oh man, that's pour one out for Steven. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens with Zangief too, just because of, like you said, he's been this sort of balancing act over the years that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the cast, but now you have to do it because he's Zangief. He's got a spot at the table, matter of fact, grandfathered in. I have noticed something about the meta. I've been trying, as we said earlier, to hammer down the what to expect, how Street Fighter 6 is going to flow. And it's been an evolving thing where I first be like, oh, it looks like it's going to be this way. It looks like it's going to be all based on offense. Then I went to, I think it's actually going to be all based on the potential for whiff punishing because the rewards seem to be there. And then Haitani came out with his analysis of where he feels things are in a similar way, had a lot of similar observations, but his conclusion was that it's actually going to be more aggressive than Street Fighter V. And the reason for that is because it's going to look something like characters are going to, the best ones are going to be those that are able to push their offense matter-of-factly on others, and it's like you have to deal with that. And in order to do that, it's like you're going to use these relatively longer-reaching normals to put pressure on, whether that's a hit or a block pressure. It's more of like you just need to not miss against your foe. And so I can digest that. In what we've seen here, I've sort of gone back to, I still think it's about the idea of maybe not quite whiff punishing, maybe whiff punishing factors into this, but it's something I'm calling basically just using people's offensive momentum, which is the first thing that you're going to naturally gravitate to in Street Fighter 6. Using that against them is going to be the immediate counter to that. And it's like, well, that's intuitive enough, but let me talk about what that looks like. Because not only have we seen global ways of doing that every character can do, drive impact, right? If you're overcommitted to your offense or your offensive string, drive impact can immediately shut that down. Of course, parry can do a similar thing, but not as easy as drive impact. We're seeing in the footage a lot of neutral jumps too. Now that might be something that's only good because people still haven't really figured the game out, but I'm talking about this developer footage where these guys have been playing for a while. Yeah. You're seeing neutral jumps. Why? Because moves have longer recovery and people are forward advancing, and you move into that pocket where you're trying to attack. If they're not occupying it and then they come down with a jumping attack, that's a huge deal. And it seems like neutral jumps kind of work because of the way people want to move forward. But we've seen footage of DJ, Manon, Marisa, and I want to talk about Dalsum. And just one thing about each one of them. Marisa has armored attacks, right? So if you're trying to move in on Marisa, you might land, but in the same way that overcommitting and getting hit by a drive impact, she has that in a better way, right? So she might be a drive impact on steroids sort of a character. Then you have to think about her that way, but don't overextend. DJ, we saw, has a sway. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because you were talking about that yesterday.
He's going to be the master of shimmies. He's basically Street Fighter 5 shimmies on steroids because he's got a million things baked into his sway. And then he has a feint. We'll get into it a lot, but yeah, he's quite compelling for DJ. Yeah.
So that idea that I'm going to bait you into, you want to attack this space because this is where I am. He has a built-in shimmy that he can move out of it quickly and then come back in. In the footage that we saw of Dalsum, again against DJ, the tried and true Dalsum goes up. I got to do this for the camera. Kind of goes up and goes backwards with his float, and then immediately comes down. We see this in Street Fighter V all the time, and then immediately comes down either with a heavy punch or the dive kick that comes at this perfect angle to catch anything that has gone in to occupy this space. He's like, nope, and then bam. We talked about Manon, how she has the advancing command grab that's sort of it looked to me sort of like the Zangief's running bear grab, but that it evades attacks, right? So she's moving forward, you've committed to an attack, and she's going right through it and grabbing you. Point is, all of this is forward momentum. You're doing your offense because that's usually the best thing, but everybody seems to have something to answer to that, where they create that pocket and then they attack you once you've whiffed. It's basically the same concept as whiff punishing, but perhaps implemented in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I love that you talk about completely unearned privilege offense and other stuff like that, and we haven't seen Cammy yet. So,
I part of me holds out that they are going to go way out of their way to make Cammy not like Cammy has been in the past, as far as the things that people have been upset about with her.
Oh no, they're going the other way. They're going the complete other way. This is Cammy. That is what Cammy is. Completely unearned privilege. I'm gonna dive kick you. I'm gonna just hit buttons and other stuff. Like, you could probably look at Cammy's frame data, like if it's up there already, and like look that everything has got like 5 less frames of recovery on it because Capcom's like, eh.
Oh, Demon Curse.
The CEO of Capcom loves Cammy. That's the only explanation we have.
They must. But so anyway, right now I feel like the meta is the best thing you can do in this game is be able to put pressure on your opponents with your normals. But the next best thing you can do is make that space a trap instead of an advantage for your opponent. And I'm seeing that a lot through both mechanics and just individual moves that characters have. And that's encouraging to me because it tells me that neither approach is going to be massively, overwhelmingly beneficial. I hope there's not just an answer. The characters that can move forward the best are matter of fact the best because they have this counter, because at the same time, just trying to move backwards and retreat and whiff punish, like there's going to be an element of that for sure, and it'll be effective. But cornering yourself in this game is a no-no because of how ridiculously powerful the corner is, and Lord forbid that you get burned out when you're in the corner. It's even worse there. But you really don't want to do that. So you got to think twice about backing up, but you also got to back up and you got to make them whiff and you got to make them, you use that momentum against them, because that seems to be a huge part of this game.
Yeah, it's they're trying to make all styles viable, but what always happens with fighting games is people get in there and they're like, what is the cheapest possible thing and the easiest way I can do it? How can I cammy this up as much as possible? And so oftentimes that means picking cammy, but also that means, the characters who play like that style, usually Rushdown is very strong in these games. Rushdown is almost universally considered to be okay to be top tier. People are like, oh, if your Rushdown character is top tier, that's fine. And so it's quite interesting. But yeah, we're going to see a lot of stuff evolve here, and a lot of interesting theories there. There's a few characters here. I think that once we see them come out, we'll have a much better idea of what the developers are fully intending with the meta of this game. Some real milestones like Cammy and Zenki. Even Dalsim, I think, is a really big indicator here, but we're going to save his discussion for another video.
Those characters usually are trendsetters for the characters that are like them, so it will be interesting to see them. Maybe that's why Capcom hasn't released them yet. They're like, hey, let's see the directions that we're going with Rushdown, the directions that we're going with Grapplers before we show you Cammy and Zangief, the very definition of those things, right? But I would really like to hear from people, if you wouldn't mind, if you've been paying attention and kind of trying to follow this meta like I have, where do you think the meta is at right now? Because I don't know by any means but these are the pieces that I've taken and kind of put together thus far. And I'd like to hear, do you agree with me? That's great. I'd love to be vindicated. But if you have other ideas, other approaches to it, things like that I haven't thought of, I'd like to hear that even more. Because I'm really trying to hammer down Street Fighter 6 as much as I can in this early stage where I have no control and can't play it. And so hit up the comments with that stuff.
All right, y'all, that's going to wrap us up for this episode of EventHubs Talk a Block. Once again, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll be back with you soon.